Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's after lunch, so we need to get some, you can stretch if you want a little bit and just get ready. It's lovely to be here. I had a good time yesterday listening to all our political friends and the different colleagues from different walks of life. I'm here to speak to you about science. By training, I'm an applied mathematician, economist, but I've come to appreciate that ultimately the driver of most of economic growth lies in scientific discovery. Right? Most of what we see around us in the room is a consequence of somebody tinkering with science at some point somewhere. And my concern is that I titled this India's Growth Frontier, Endless Growth Frontier. There was a very famous manuscript written in 1945 by a gentleman named Vannevar Bush in America. And this is a picture of the actual report. It's a very thin manuscript, but I would submit to you that no other 15-page manuscript has had more consequence for modern economic growth in the last several decades than this one. It is basically a submission from Vannevar Bush to the United States President of the time, Harry Truman, saying that unless we invest in science, it's very unlikely that the US will grow the way it has grown in the last several decades. What he really meant by that was the taxpayer, the US taxpayer, should be the one who puts in the money for science, not the individuals, the state. The importance of that moment is hard to overemphasize. It was the beginning of a societal consensus. And I want to say that phrase again, societal consensus. I think one of the things that we are lacking in India right now is a societal consensus behind the importance of science. We talk about engineering, and engineering is important, and India is known for its prowess at producing engineers, but we underemphasize science, I think, to our own detriment. There is so much upside potential. I live and work in the Harvard-MIT complex, which is one of the bastions of science in the world, and I'm very fortunate to be there. And I see it all around me. Companies being created, discoveries being formed, vaccines, new age materials, new algorithms, genome sequencing. Everything is happening within 10 square miles around me. And the number of entrepreneurs who are creating dramatically new things is fantastic to watch. I'm trained as an academic, but over the last 15, 20 years, I've started a dozen companies, essentially feeding off the science and contributing to it also. And to me, creating a company is as much a research project as writing an academic paper, because in the end, it's all a process of experimentation. And I've just loved it so much that that's what I want to communicate, that excitement to you. Now, most of my professional time is spent in China, India, and the United States. What I'd like to get us to think a little bit about is what are some of the possibilities that a consensus around science can unlock for us in India in the next several decades. Prime Minister Modi ji was here yesterday talking about us being a top 5 economy already and aspiring to do much more. I think the aspiration is truly endless. And again, let me keep going. We are familiar with a number of amazing things that have happened. If you go back to the 1960s, those are some archival pictures on the left when we used to borrow small rockets and ride our bicycles to different places in the 1960s. All the way to now doing Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan and these very heavy launch vehicles, LVM-2. This is just a picture of the heaviest launch vehicle that we have, which shot its first satellite into space, I would say around 2017 or 2018. And the progress is just dramatic and rapid. Some of the policy frameworks that have kicked in to enable this are also now well known. We've got the NSIL, which permits commercial space applications in a way that unlocks the monopoly away from ISRO. So it's always the state setting the stage for private entrepreneurs to do something. This is an area where we've done quite well. Another area, of course, is, again, the Prime Minister alluded to this yesterday, the Aadhaar, the biometric ID, and the India stack that has been built atop it. I like to use the phrase ease of life, right? It's not just ease of doing business, it's just ease of life. And the phrase at the bottom says India has gone from being a data-dark country not more than 15 years ago to now being one where each individual's data exhaust is a monetizable asset. What does that mean? It means that you are poor. Even if you were poor, you're still going about your life and using various forms of digital payments and generating a digital paper trail to yourself. And that exhaust is monetizable to you in principle. And that's what's going to happen. And the beauty of that is that that's not related to your paper income or your rupee income in some ways. So lots of progress. But I'd like us also to be realistic and say that India's progress has to be put in perspective, right? If we want to go from a 3 to 4 trillion economy to be a $10 trillion economy, we have to be realistic and we have to look around and say, where can we pick and choose lessons from and see how we don't need to reinvent the wheel. As I said, I spent a lot of time in China, going back to my first trip to China was in the mid-1990s, maybe early 1990s, starting in about 2008. I co-built a company, a software company in Beijing and New Delhi that was quite successful, sold it a few years later, learned to speak Chinese, my kids learned to speak Chinese, and so we are sort of full citizens of these two countries in some ways. And I want to share, but the way that China has gone about leapfrogging its historical assets, so to speak, is quite different from the way that India is going about it. And I think there's much to be learned from it. And that's what I'd like us to do. In preparing for these brief comments here, one of the things I did was go to the Global Innovation Index. This is an ensemble of about 60 or 70 indicators that collectively purport to represent the innovation environment in a country, and looked at it going back about 15 years. And the two countries that have shot up the innovation index the most in the last 15 years are China and India. China by much more than India has, in fairness, but India's done pretty well too. So in that sense, China offers a good counterpoint to us to learn from in some ways, since it's also been the site of pretty dramatic growth. This is a graph that requires me to explain a little bit. It's done by my colleague Josh Lerner and some of his academic partners. You may not be able to see it very well. It essentially is a graph of domestic patenting for specific areas. I just put up 6 examples here, but there are 14 in total. These 14 are the technologies that the United States considers the most salient to its economic security in the next several decades, right? So examples of this would be advanced computing, quantum sciences, space technology, renewable energy, advanced materials, so on and so forth. The red line shows China's progress over the last 40 years. The blue line shows America's progress. What you see from this is that in every one of the 14 critical areas, on the screen here we just have 6, but in every one of the 14 areas, China vastly outstrips the United States. Right? This should be very sobering. If we looked for India's patenting on this graph of 40 years, you would have to find a microscope to find it. It's completely missing. I want to pause with this graph. It really is something that we should take to heart and say, what is it that we can do about this? None of this is to say that I'm not as excited as the next person about the progress that India has made with India Stack, space materials, vaccines. All of those are amazing. But those are just the foundation for us to do 10x and 100x better. And these graphs tell us that we have our task cut out for us. It's that simple, right? If China is completely eclipsing the United States, particularly in the last 10 years, there's something that they're doing that maybe we can take a page on. Not literally copy it, but maybe see what it is that they're doing that's worth emulating. Our entrepreneurial policy agenda, I believe, has to be orders of magnitude more ambitious than what it currently is. It's not sufficient for us to be doing what it is. Just to give you a particular concrete data point, the ratio of R&D to GDP in the United States is, give or take, 0.6, 0.7%. Right? And if anything, it's trending in the wrong direction. It's going down because our expenditure on R&D, this is an ensemble number, so I'm lumping in a whole bunch of things into it from the national accounts. The R&D number isn't budging so much. And I'll talk, of course, about the National Research Foundation, the ANRF, and so on and so forth in a few minutes. But despite all that, it's not really budging, and GDP continues to grow. So R&D divided by GDP is stuck at about 0.6, 0.7%, again, give or take. The United States is about 2.5%, right? So quite a bit more, 3.5 times more. China is about 3.5% of a much, much bigger economy than ours. Israel and Korea are in the 4%. So we are very, very far, even in the amount of money that we're spending. I just heard a sobering thing with a collection of some of my entrepreneur friends in Bangalore, which is that even the money that our government is, with all good intention, allocating to R&D, as small as it is not getting fully utilized. We're having trouble finding, not that we lack human capital, we certainly don't. Not that we lack people with good intent, we certainly don't. But we're having trouble translating the science from the laboratories that we have into anything approximating commercial applications. So not only is the money going in minuscule by world standards, our results on patenting are very low, and whatever money we are putting in, the production function isn't working to generate patents. The data are pretty clear and sobering. But I think that there's a lot that can be done that can improve this pretty dramatically. Okay, one of the things I want us to focus on is just to ask, what is it that China does and India currently does not do? Again, I'm not saying that we should blindly copy it. I'm simply saying that one of my roles as an academic is to look around and say, what can we learn? How can we make sense of the patterns in the data and see what lessons we can draw from it? These are examples of very simple but very important, fundamentally important scientific infrastructure. Without these things, individual scientists cannot do their jobs, right? Just like we need the infrastructure of a road, which is a publicly owned asset for the most part, for us to be able to drive and do whatever it is that we do, whether it's attend the NDTV summit or go to work somewhere or go to school or do an errand, we're relying on public infrastructure, right? Similarly, scientists have to rely on scientific infrastructure, and that scientific infrastructure is a public good. We cannot reasonably expect individuals to fund their own infrastructure. That would be a grotesquely inefficient way to go about things, right? Examples would be testing facilities, right? I'll give you some examples. Here's a picture of one that I know personally a little bit. It's the Shanghai synchrotron, right? This is, I would say, I have the size there, 180,000 square meter campus, right? It's basically a super microscope at the molecular level, right? So it allows you to look at molecular structures, both for life science research, material science, and any number of other things. It is put up by the city of Shanghai. It is not put up by an individual company. It's not put up by a tycoon, by a consortium of private assets. It's put up by the city government in conjunction with the government of the province, in conjunction with the national government. It is a public scientific asset that is then made available to all scientists in China to leverage in some ways. I looked up this one. There's about 500 million, billion with a B, billion hours of what's called beam time, in other words, microscope time, that's been used by scientists in companies and in academic institutions to write 11,000 papers and start literally 4 or 5 dozen companies, many of which are household names now. Right? So a small expenditure, it's not that much actually, I don't have the number up here, it's about $150 million that the cities, that the different government setups came together to fund. It took about 10, 15 years for it to get fully up and running and kicked into it. But the IRR, so to speak, for the economists and the financiers in the room, the internal rate of return on putting that capital in is massive, right? Here's another number for you to think about. On average, at least in the Western world, $1 spent on science produces, anyone want to guess how many dollars of value come back when you spend $1 on science, or a rupee on science? Anyone? How about this guy in the front row? What do you say? 50. Any others? 100? These are real optimists. The average is about 18, right? So you spend $1, you get 18 bucks back, which is a pretty good deal. Any private person would tell you that's an awesome deal, right? For almost any reasonable cost of capital, that's an amazing result, right? And for the outlier ones, the things that are so massively successful, even the numbers that the two people in the front suggested, 50 and 100 or something like that, are conservative. The Human Genome Project has already yielded $200 of value for every dollar put into it, right? The challenge for us is that our policymakers, we had one of our policymakers here just now, I think right before me, our policymakers and even our political classes have very short electoral horizons. Right? This is what I mean by scientific consensus, societal consensus. As a society, we need to agree somehow. I don't really know how to do it. I'm saying it's a collective task. We need to agree that even though the benefits will not manifest within the election cycle, right, that we have to get somehow the national will, frankly, the guts and the courage to invest in science so that you can get payoffs that are not 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1. You can't get to be a $10 trillion economy with results that are 3-to-1 and 4-to-1 and so on. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. The math doesn't add up. There is no society that has transitioned from middle income status to high income status without extraordinary investment in science in recorded human history. Why would we be any different? We're just not going to move. So how do we do that? That's our collective endeavor in some ways, right? Okay. People know about BYD. Has anyone heard of BYD? A lot of people, okay. World's biggest electric car company now. Completely by serendipity, I happened to go to BYD soon after it was born. Okay? It's about 30 years old now. No plans, I just happened to be in Shenzhen at the time and went to see it. And at that time, it was a battery company. But even at that time, in the showroom, I remember, not the founder, but somebody in the early days, took us around and said, eventually we're going to make these electric cars. 25 years ago, the idea of an electric car was something very futuristic, Isaac Asimov-like. But this guy was already saying, I've just about made a battery, but I'm thinking 20 years from now, I'm going to make an electric car. And you know what? Here are all the research papers we're writing today, so that 20 years from now, that's a time horizon. That's a time horizon. Right? The second thing I want to say about BYD is, I put up on the left, public infrastructure. Remember the point I just made, that you need the infrastructure. BYD has completely leveraged and contributed to the public infrastructure in Shenzhen over the years. I just put some examples up here. The national EV policy, the city of Shenzhen, the infrastructure that they had to develop to allow electric buses to move, and so on and so forth. So this is a development that has happened to make it the largest car company in the world by far. Not quite the most valuable because of the differences in the capital markets in the US and China. But really an amazing example of pure science, right? Leveraging scientific infrastructure and the importance of working in conjunction with the policymakers. Okay. My colleagues did an animation. I'd like you to see this. China has anyone know how fast the fastest high-speed rail train goes in China today? 350 kilometers per hour. 680 is not done yet. 450 is not done yet. The target is 450, and the ambitious target, 15 years out, not electoral time horizon, 15 years. I realize they have a different political system, but the target 15 years out is 600 kilometers per hour. Today's average reality is 350 kilometers per hour. I take the Amtrak Acela, which goes from Boston to Washington routinely through New York City, and it struggles to get to 150 kilometers per hour. Right? It struggles. The Chinese trains are at 350. You know where all this started from? It started from an academic paper. There was a scientist in a small university in China who started writing an academic paper, a simulation engine, and the simulation was about what happens when you have high-speed rolling stock, in other words, the wheels of a train, going on solid track, metal track. What is the deformation that happens in both the rolling stock and the track? Because when you're going at that high speed, you need to make sure that you manage that and the material science is exactly right. So it was a scientific paper and a simulation engine that created the impetus for the very first high-speed track, and then a series of experiments over a long time. And I'll play it just for fun, right? 2008, 2011, 14, 16, and that's 25, right? So this is clearly the biggest anywhere. And as we were just saying, the targets are now to double this in speed. So we need that planning horizon, and we need the scientific infrastructure to allow us to do this. Now, we've got a lot of successes. I put up nuclear energy, right? We're a nuclear power. Going back to Indira Gandhi's time and Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time, but the world has moved far beyond, right? We had accidents. I put up the names of the most celebrated ones that I could remember, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and so on and so forth. But today, when I look at the scientific infrastructure around me in the Boston area, right, what I see is fundamental research. I just put up one of the main labs, again, publicly funded infrastructure, publicly funded science, right? Lawrence Livermore Laboratories that does research both on fission and fusion, nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. Most of the really cool results coming out are on fusion. Put up a few examples up here. The ones on the right are fusion companies that are racing to be the first to see if they can get to commercial nuclear power, fusion power. The ones on the left are fission power. We don't know which one's going to win out or whether both will, but in the end, something will. And we just can't afford, I think, to be stuck with our glories. I don't know how to go backwards at this. I was going to go back and say that, yes, it's true that we did that. It's true that we have atomic power, but the world has moved rapidly ahead. I'll give you one more example, right? We love to say that we're the pharmacy of the world, right? We produce the medication. When I go into my local drugstore in Newton, Massachusetts, and I pick up medicine off the shelf, I think there's a 40% chance that it's made in India somewhere, right? Either an unbranded generic or a branded generic that gets some other label on it. And that's nice that we were able to do that. And we provide vaccines to the world. There's a lot that we can be justifiably proud of. But again, the science has left all this way behind. The only company around here, I should say that carefully because there may be others that I don't know of. I know Biocon pretty well because the founder, Kiran Mazumdar, is a good friend. This is an example. This is a company that she's co-founded, Immunil, that CAR T cancer therapy is one of the newest ways to treat cancer, harnessing the body's own immune system, right, to tackle the cancer, which is a more sort of natural way to take care of it. You essentially stimulate your immune system to attack the tumor cells. But it costs between $500,000 and $1 million per patient. Obviously, that's unaffordable, both in the West but also in India. So Kiran and Devi Shetty and some other people are teaming up to come up with completely different science that tries to reach the same goal in a different way. It is extremely high risk, right? Extremely high risk. We need much more of this, stuff that keeps up with the science in some way. And again, we need the scientific infrastructure, and we need the time horizons to be able to do this, right? I want to just keep saying this word again and again. We need the courage to arrive at a societal consensus, to invest and take risk. Yes? The Prime Minister loves to talk about taking risk, and he's a risk taker, right? But we need to translate that into arenas other than the political and policy arena, into places that we are not currently displaying that, right? I put up here, about 10 years ago, the Prime Minister asked me to help devise something of an innovation framework for the country. A collection of us came together in an act of, I hope, public spiritedness and wrote a report that resulted in the Atal Innovation Mission, which is now housed in Niti Aayog, and part of it is going into Dharmendra Pradhan's Ministry of Education right now. That's the logo. That's a vote of confidence for AIM. It's really been an incredible, incredible success. But I wanted to put up here a picture from the report that we wrote. We had this very simple pyramid to say that there are some things we should do immediately so that the public and the schools and the incubators and the universities and entrepreneurs can get some immediate benefits. You want some early wins so that people feel like we want to participate in this. There are some things that we have to do for the medium term, create an innovation ecosystem, and the long term is a tough one. We have to create a mindset of curiosity, risk-taking, and courage. Right? I went to a very nice school in Mumbai as a kid, and then to a very nice school in Bangalore before I went to the United States for my further study. But the one thing I can tell you about the way science was taught, and then I sat for the IIT and matriculated IIT Madras before leaving it instead. But what I can tell you about all the science that it was taught, it was not exactly fun, the way it was done. I would like science to be taught to be fun. And one of the cool things that have worked really well are these Atal Tinkering Labs, right? Which really is a place for kids from standard 6 to 12 to have fun. Instead of memorizing a textbook or, Bernoulli's principle or Archimedes' principle or whatever the heck, or first law of thermodynamics or second law of thermodynamics, I would memorize it, that I would go to my dad who's sitting here and say, Dad, explain this to me. And then he would come up with some gimmick to explain it to me, right? But it'd be so much nicer if the kids could go and play with something. Materials, little wires, little Lego building blocks, soft robots, hard robots, simulation engines, CAD/CAM. These are dirt cheap now. And so we've got 10,000 of these labs opened all over the country. And Nirmala Sitharaman in the last budget announced that they would take it up to 50,000. All that is good. That's part of the infrastructure for science, right? But there's a lot more that we can do. There is a nonprofit whose board I chair that was started by a couple of colleagues and friends in New Delhi called FAST, Foundation for Advancing Science and Technology. They provided a lot of the input for the Anusandhan National Research Foundation, ANRF, that was just announced as a big research fund. I put that up here also. So there is an ANRF that's in progress, right? There is a new fund for deep tech. RDI, I've forgotten what the acronym is, 1 lakh crores, which is about, what is 1 lakh crores? $12 billion, something like that. So it's decent size, right? Not huge by world standards, but it's a very decent size to get things up and running. That's going to be announced soon. But there are many things we could do. A number of folks in the last day have talked about tapping into the fact that the U.S. is not being exactly hospitable to foreign talent these days. And maybe this is a time to get people who want to be in India to reconsider whether they can do some of the research here. Many other things that we could be doing. Thinking about the ease of doing science. And one of the things you will find if you poll scientists around the country is that they find the simplest task difficult because, again, the physical infrastructure of doing science is missing. So if we measured the ease of doing science and treated it as something that we needed to improve and a KPI for us as policymakers to improve, I think it would yield dramatic results. And the last thing I would say is that we need to do stuff that would allow us to... The India Science Festival is the creation of one of the founders of that same NGO, FAST, Varun Agarwal. Varun and I had created a software company ourselves about 10, 15 years ago. But Varun has started a nonprofit which runs an annual India Science Festival, right? I think it's in its 7th or 8th year now. It runs mostly in Pune. For some reason, I forget exactly why it's over there. But it's an amazing fun thing for 3-4 days when scientists come from all over the world and show young people, actually all ages, how to have fun with science. So we're trying to create a culture of scientific literacy and scientific risk-taking in different ways. But there's a lot more that we can do with this. About 3 years ago, one of my Harvard colleagues and I were inspired to do something about the following very sobering and distressing fact. There are 8 billion people in the world, right? About 1 billion of those are in the 18 to 26-year-old age range, okay? Most of those kids have a hard time getting to college. Okay? If they do get to college, they have a hard time with their careers taking off because they are low income, they're first in their families to go to colleges, they lack social capital, they lack mentors, they lack role models, they lack the infrastructure that allows those who are not in that situation to have their careers go to a flying start. So we decided to do something about it. And we've created a global NGO, right, headquartered in Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts. We've got 10 offices around the world now, including one in Bangalore. And what we do is provide an infrastructure for low-income college kids to come and engage in a really fun process of rediscovering the joy of learning. I'm an educator and an entrepreneur, but primarily an educator. And I want people to experience the joy of learning, just like my parents taught me to be joyous in learning. Right? So then it's not a tax to keep on learning. Yeah? And what we do is put them into groups of people, synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, peer-to-peer, where they learn to communicate, negotiate, argue in a friendly and constructive way, give and take, the kinds of skills that you need in any profession. We're not, the NGO, it's called Aspire Institute. We're trying to teach them to aspire to being something much more than simply getting a job. It has been, if I'm allowed to say, wildly successful. This year we had 300,000 students sign up. And we're just getting started. We're doubling every year, and our projection is to get to 1 million students a year by the beginning of 2027. Right? Last year we had about 45,000 students from India, and our projection for next year for India is in excess of 200,000 students to go through it. And you can see in country after country after country, we're in 190 countries, you can see that the kids who go through this and manage to finish the course of the program, it's all free, by the way, completely free. All those who go through this start raising the odds of getting internships and getting their careers up to a kickstart. I'm going to pause with these comments. This is the name of the institute, Aspire. I'd encourage anybody who wants to participate. It's a plug-and-play platform. People who know others who should take it. You know kids who should take it. Your organizations. Spread it around. It's completely free. It's spreading like a virus in a good way. That's the website, aspireleaders.org. And if you have something to contribute to it, either as a donor or as a company that wants to participate to provide internships, or you want to be a mentor, it's completely plug and play. We have 300 corporate organizations from around the world participating. We've got dozens of religious organizations, charities, churches, NGOs, government ministers, entire countries, you name it. Again, it's just a plug-and-play platform to help the kids to get their careers to take off in a better start. But I think that in the end, to tie this back to the scientific program that I have in mind, if we can get young people to think of science as a key driver of economic growth, societal well-being, and progress, right, and human development in its broadest possible sense, the world would be such a better place. And if we could allow this billion kids to have their careers to go off to a better start, think about what a nicer world we'd live in. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to our engagement.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for being part of World Summit, NDTV World Summit 2025. And thank you, Professor Khanna. Professor Khanna, I was thinking academics generally tend to be a little dense and rigorous. I don't want to use the word boring, but this was very accessible.
Not dense.
Presentation.
I can make it dense.
Dense is going to come now. So,
That's okay.
Professor Khanna, Professor Tarun Khanna is somebody who went to Princeton University. He also has been teaching at Harvard Business School for several years now. He's somebody who takes a lot of interest in culture, society, geopolitics, and more importantly, he's been driving home the message that innovation is incomplete without inclusion. And that is something that we want to talk about. But Professor Khanna, I was watching your presentation, and one thing that came to my mind is that as political reporters, every time the budget comes up, we see that the research funding has gone up. But colleges, educational institutions, paisa jata kahan hai, when it comes to scientific research. So why is India not able to showcase public investment in science? What do you think is the most important reason?
So first of all, I would say that it's not an India-specific problem. I think most developing countries, so we are currently what's called the low middle-income countries. So we've gotten into middle-income status. I'd like us all to internalize that no country has escaped middle-income status without investing in science, ever. It's not happened. So we have to do it, right? I just don't think the consensus is around. Can I tell you a story to answer your question? Uday Kotak, who is one of our bankers, and I were engaged in what we're doing now, like a fireside chat. I don't know why they're always called fireside chats. We're engaged in a chat with a room full of maybe 100 CEOs. And I just asked in the course of that chat, how many people in this room have had an honest-to-goodness conversation with a scientist in a professional capacity in the last 12 months? Right? Any guesses for how many raised their hands out of 100 people?
Zero.
None? You guys are so pessimistic. One. It was somebody from pharma. I repeated the experiment in the Harvard Business School classroom. It's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but it was, again, a room full of about 70 to 100 CEOs from all over the world. And I said, how many of you have had a bona fide conversation? 70% of the people raised their hand, give or take, almost in any cohort of people. There's something that is stopping our entrepreneurial classes from thinking of our scientists and our academic institutions as resources for ideas. Dare I say, the standard impulse is to say, those guys are in their ivory towers, they're not doing anything productive, they're not worth really talking to. They're not working on problems that are meaningful to us.
But Professor Khanna, when it comes to tech, when it comes to IT, we do so well in welfare apps, you know, Aadhaar, UPI. But when it comes to generative AI, DeepSeek or ChatGPT, it looks like a very far-fetched dream. Why is our tech not really competent? And is the same problem applicable even in the area of technology?
I think it's the same problem. I mean, the scientists dismiss the entrepreneurs dismiss the scientists, and we're locked in this mutual suspicion, which just needs to be debugged, and something needs to be done about it. There was a very nice experiment that the government started in the previous administration of Prime Minister Modi, which involved finding 5 sets of corridors, Pune, Bangalore, NCR, a couple others, bringing together small groups of scientists from universities and small groups of entrepreneurs in those cities, and creating the soft infrastructure and the physical infrastructure to help them to realize that they can work together, right? To make sure that the scientists knew that there are practical problems that their science could apply to. And it began to work. I just think we need to try a lot of experiments to see how to debug that process, to break that cycle of mistrust down.
Absolutely. Professor Khanna, also tell us a little bit of, because you work very closely with students, you have a lot of students. How is America now for Indian students? What's your one advice for parents aspiring to send their children abroad? Because there's a lot of uncertainty here, and there is a sense that the shift in policy and politics seems to have really affected educational institutions the most.
Well, as anybody who accesses the news, I should say, rather than reads the news, accesses the news would know, higher education is going through a tumultuous time, and my university, Harvard, is no exception. It's uncertain times, and when students are asking me, should we be considering the United States, my honest answer is you should consider all the options. At this point, we have plenty of interesting universities that are starting up in India, not just the IITs, but liberal arts institutions. We've got Ashoka, we've got Kriya, we've got Plaksha, we had a whole bunch of others, Flame. We have universities in Canada and the United Kingdom that are capitalizing on the US uncertainty at this point and are competing for talent. And in the end, I think competition for talent is a good thing. It's good for the students, it's good for the academics. And I just hope that the policy uncertainty in the United States dies down in some ways. Yeah.
Right. Professor Khanna, when you look at international trends, what is that one trend, be it in trade or in policy, that you think is really worrying for the world? And in that context, how do you think the American consumer is looking at this whole trade war that's playing out in the context of tariffs?
To me, by far, the most worrying trend, well, there are 2. Can I give you 2? Yeah. 2 worrying trends to me are dramatically rising inequality, income inequality and wealth inequality more than income inequality. And that's what's fueling, I think, the unrest. Rishi Sunak spoke about that in his comments about Britain on the discussion yesterday with the other prime ministers. And that's true in most societies that have embraced market forces. Markets have an uncanny ability of allocating resources to whoever is able at that moment to use them well. but they also seem to be generating quite a bit of inequality. So we need some balancing out through public policy to make it more equitable. And the other one is just managing the carbon footprint. There are these, I forget what the technical term is among environmentalists, but there are, I believe, 7 environmental thresholds that constitute tipping points.
Right.
And the world has already gone over the tipping point for 6 out of the 7. So I think we're in a very precarious place as a human race vis-a-vis using too much carbon. It's fantastic to see India being so open to renewable energy. And I see that one of your main sponsors is ChargePoint, which I gather is part of the clean energy infrastructure around here. So that's the second thing that really worries me.
Right. And Professor Khanna, when you look at India's multi-alignment policy and the fact that India is also very assertive now when it comes to its own national policy, you've been an avid watcher of India, China, and the US, and these are 3 superpowers that India is hoping to have, a good relationship with. Help us understand, do you think India will be able to stand its own ground when it comes to challenges in the future?
Okay, I don't mean to force it back to my topic, but honestly, if the only way to have bargaining power is to have some unique cards to play, right? One unique card that we have to play is a relatively youthful population and an extremely large market that people want access to. We're using that card. We can use it better. I'm sure my friend, Mr. Jaishankar, would be a better person to address that question too. But the second thing I would say is, if we don't have our own science and our own scientific prowess, we're always going to be hostage to somebody else who has a better set of cards to play. So we better get our scientific act together. Otherwise, I think it's going to be very hard to be a superpower of any sort. That's just the reality. Right. And it's doable. That's the good news part of it. Yeah.
And so what do you think is the most optimistic part of India, and one thing that you think is really challenging, something about India that worries you?
Something about India that worries me. Excessively short time horizons. Maybe another way to say it is impatience, right? I think we've gotten used to, in both a good but not so good way, of finding ways to generate quick economic wins. That's why we have so many startups all over. I'm part of that feeding frenzy of creating startups and funding them and so on. So I'm not knocking it at all. I think it's a good thing. But it's not the same as doing really long horizon stuff. I gave you a couple examples from China just because it is the one country that has outstripped everybody, and so I think is deserving of some introspection. Those are returns in multiple orders of magnitude that are higher than what we are pursuing. 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times greater.
Right.
So we need to play in the big leagues. Yeah.
Right. Professor Khanna, there was one, I think Parag Khanna talked about political pandemic, and he talked about populism.
He's my fourth cousin.
Oh, the Khannas are all related, is it?
I'm just kidding.
So he talked about populism, and there are 11 states in this country that have some form of direct benefit transfer, some income support to women or unemployed youth. Some people call it freebie. I believe it's welfare economics. As an economic strategist, do you think this is a good policy, or what is the flip side to this?
Oh, I do have a point of view on this. So we've tried all sorts of benefit transfers, we meaning humanity, in the last 10. My reading of the evidence is that the thing that has worked the best are forms of conditional cash transfer, right? Where there are cash transfers and giveaways to people who deserve it, but they're conditioned on things that most people in the society would agree on are good things. A canonical example of a success is in Brazil or Mexico. CCTs, conditional cash transfers, are predicated on the family making sure that the kid is in school. Yeah. Or making sure that the kid eats a midday meal, or making sure that vaccinations are done. As long as you do that, you get the free cash. And those have worked very well to move people from the lowest rung of poverty up to what I would say is lower middle income status in that country. So I think that there's a lot of evidence that that's a good idea.
Right. Professor Khanna, this is my last question to you. I want you to answer all of this in just one word.
Answer all of them in one word.
You've worked with Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, so can you describe him in just one word? What is that one thing that comes to your mind when you...
One word. Hyper-prepared. like really, really with it.
That's what.
Briefed at least. So,
Okay. Donald Trump?
no idea.
Okay.
No idea.
Okay. Okay. New World Order. This is something we keep hearing. So,
What's the one word that comes to mind? It's a jargony word, but it rings true, multipolar. Yeah.
okay. Impact of AI on jobs.
Very positive
Okay. Okay.
for me.
That's nice. Indian politics.
Chaotic.
Gen
I'm
Z.
not involved in it, so it's chaotic to me. Yeah.
Okay. Gen Z, because that's what we hear of quite often.
Well, Gen Z thinks I don't get it.
Okay.
That's not a word, but that's the way that I relate to Gen Z. I'm a source of bewilderment to my Gen Z kids.
Okay. So you work with a lot of Gen Z kids, so
Yes, I do, yes.
Harvard University, the rock star of academia.
Yes.
So what would you say if I were to ask you?
Actually, very socially conscious. Much more so than I think my generation was.
That's nice. One word for NDTV World Summit. You attended all the sessions. How would you describe the World Summit?
Really fun to meet all sorts of people, yeah. So,
Okay. My last one, merit, because that's your core area of interest.
merit. So merit and meritocracy is something we have to keep on working on to make sure that it's fair and delivering what we think it should be delivering. It's not something that automatically happens.
Right. So, Professor Khanna, you also have set an example for others. You have a unique model. By creating Aspire, you have taught children from marginalized backgrounds the importance of AI and modern tech. Let me call some of these Aspire leaders is what you call them, right? We have Gauri Challa with us, Pavani, Nitesh Taral, Roshan, and we also have Vineet. Ladies and gentlemen, these are students, these are young people from extremely marginalized backgrounds. I was looking at some of their profiles, their parents are all extremely, they come from extremely poor backgrounds, and also all of them are first generation graduates. In fact, all of them are the first in their families to go to college, and all of them now have companies of their own, or they are into some form of invention. Innovation is core to their existence. They also have entered professional courses. Many of them are also looking at doing their masters, right? Gauri, you said that you wanted to, STEM is something that you are very passionate about. Help us understand a little bit about your background and what you want to do. You worked in Oracle, right? Yeah.
So basically, when I was in my BTech second year, I did a project in college and we submitted it for SIH, Smart India Hackathon. And that project we also submitted for Inventors Challenge TV show, which was aired on Colors. So out of 1,600 participants who have submitted their ideas, our idea got shortlisted and we made it till the final. And when I actually went to the TV show, what I realized was the number of females who attended the show were very less. Out of all the participants, only 3 were girls. So at that time, me, along with the other girls, we decided, let us make a platform where we can teach STEM to the girls right from the early age, so that they can learn it and they will have that confidence that tech is also a part. We can do tech and we can actually erase all those stereotypes where they feel tech is not a girl thing. And especially for the underprivileged kids, we wanted to give those STEM kids, teach them practically how science can be done. So that was the thing.
Beautiful. Nitesh's father is a bus conductor in Best Bus in Mumbai. I love the city, Mumbai. But tell me a little bit about your, where did you grow up and what made you take up this program and what do you do now?
So my father has been a bus conductor in the BEST, and my mother worked as a jewelry worker in Seeps, Andheri. So since they just matriculated, education has always been a core in my journey, and my parents always focused on education. They sent me to a good convent school in Mumbai, and which is the only reason I think, because I'm the first generation learner in my family, across my extended family, and that is only because possible of education and when I came across Aspire Leaders Program, the website said that they're empowering first generation and low-income students like me.
Right.
That gave me the power to
Right.
pursue.
Professor Khanna, you've also been talking about the importance of peer groups for children because otherwise many of these opportunities do get inaccessible. Roshan, would you like to explain to us? He studied hospitality management in Chennai. You're a sales executive. Help us understand the importance of good mentors to have a good career.
There was a point where when I was doing my hospitality and COVID hit, and it was all across the job opportunities were very less. Then I came across Aspire Leaders Program, where I was fortunate enough to learn from peers all across the globe. The Aspire resources were really helpful to me. When I was preparing for my MBA interviews, I fortunately got selected at IIM Visakhapatnam, and I'm currently pursuing my MBA from IIM Visakhapatnam. So Aspire Institute resources like the social impact seed funding, which I received for empowering the visually impaired students, which I come from a small town in Odisha. It's known as Berhampur. I started my project over there, got this fund, and finally I'm a Community Action Award winner now. So the learning about the business aspect, just when I was doing my hospitality, I was understanding the service excellence side.
Right.
But I always wanted to learn more about business, operations, marketing, strategy. And then I came across Aspire, which provided mentorship sessions on business. And fortunately, I'm here at NDTV World Summit. I'm extremely grateful for the team over here.
That's very nice. Pavni is from Hyderabad. She's the first generation college goer here. Help us see, for women, a lot of limitations are already set, right? Especially when you come from families that may not have resources. How did you take that leap of, getting into a program like this and setting yourself free in a lot of ways?
So I am from Hyderabad, and I come from an area where all my peers who are around me are in science. And I have that road not taken, always wanted to take economics, because I know that science always gives a direction, but economics is economics actually helps us to strategize the operation, right? So that's why I chose economics. And in my bachelor's, I got to know about Aspire. When I was in my bachelor's about to graduate. So I was in this midst where I had to take a right path. I was academically strong, but I was always not confident in making decisions decisively on spot. But after going through this program, I guess because I had a lot of peer learning,
right.
I got to meet a lot of people across the world, got to contact people from Indonesia, someone sitting in Nigeria who were of my age thinking differently. I thought, why can't I do it?
Okay.
So this program actually helped me think beyond the boundaries and beyond traditional thinking. And that is not actually taught to girls who come from my background. I'm fortunate to have parents who are encouraging me. They always whatever opportunity you get, grab it, own it, and transform your world.
Very nice. Vineet is from Dioghar in Aurangabad, specifically interested in him because he's from Bihar and Bihar elections are coming up. Vineet, help us understand. He's also somebody interested in clean tech, right? Yes. So, and he has a company of you have a little company of your own. So help us understand. See, getting a job is one thing, but you also wanted to have something of your own. How did you get there?
Yeah. So definitely, so in Bihar, people usually say कि लोग बिहार से बाहर आते हैं काम करने के लिए. That's a very big problem. So I take that problem when I was in the college, and then I started inventing something from that Bihar, and I have invented a technology through which I convert the waste plastic into fuel. But from doing that innovation from that village, there were nothing to do. क्या करूँ, कहाँ जाऊँ, किसको present करूँ, where I'll find these things and all. Then I got to know कि there is a Aspire program from somewhere on social media, and then I directly applied कि चलो कुछ करते हैं, मिल ही जाएगा कुछ ना कुछ, we'll see something. And based on that, I applied, and they have guided me through that process. How I can present myself, how I can present my idea. And currently I am leading a company, Javix Technology, as well as serving my community to empower them through the startup and entrepreneurship. And all the youths from my community, I am from a very remote place in Aurangabad. So I support them through this journey, and that's what Aspire has transformed me, what I have invented at that small village, and currently presenting my idea and leading a company.
Okay, thank you so much, all of you, and all the best. Really inspiring stories of struggle, resistance, and eventual success. Professor Khanna, do you see this as a responsibility? Do you see this as the only model that works for the world?
No, I wouldn't say it's the only model. I'm just saying this is an experiment that my colleagues and I started, and I invite you all to join in. It's a plug-and-play model. It's really for the next generations. I think I do think that I was brought up, my parents are here, they brought me up to leave the world a better place. And I think if we can do something, just remember the numbers. There are 1 billion people with a B in this age group, right? And the vast majority of them, let's call it 900 million, are like these kids. They are completely deserving. They're unbelievably smart and motivated as long as they get a little bit of a chance. All you have to do is extend your hand out, metaphorically, with support, money, mentoring, connections, internships. And we're doing this around the world. I'm very lucky to have spent 30 years, 40, who's counting, 30, 40, right? 40 years in Cambridge, making friends. I have students everywhere who are accomplished. And I'm pretty shameless about telling them, it's time for you to step up and join this. And I'm walking the talk along with all my friends. So please join me in thanking all of them for coming all the way. Our two Aspire leaders in Bangalore, Nitya and Sashi, are sitting there. If you have time, please talk to them before you leave. Yeah. And join in. The website is aspireleaders.org. And a big thanks to NDTV for allowing us to invite these kids up on the stage. And thank you, Vasudha.
Thank you, Professor Khanna. And thank you, all of you, and all the best. Thank you, Professor Khanna, for this wonderful session and for the presentation.
Thank you.